Jeffrey King's palms slicked with sweat as he stepped off the interstellar transport onto the Hazari homeworld. The alien atmosphere, thick with unfamiliar scents, filled his lungs. He was here to give a primitive species pleasure and save humanity in the process. The stakes couldn't be higher. Earth's population was being ravaged by a pandemic, and the Hazari possessed the advanced medical technology that could halt its spread. But the aliens viewed humans as weak, unintelligent creatures, hardly worth their time. Jeffrey's mission: change their minds, secure a trade agreement, and save millions of lives back home. As he scanned the spaceport, a tall, lithe figure approached. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent blue hue, and her eyes, large and entirely black, regarded him with unmistakable disdain. "I am Rigel," she announced, her voice cold and clinical. "Daughter of the planetary governor and your assigned escort. Try to keep up, human." Jeffrey nodded, forcing a smile. "Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm Jeffrey King, lead negotiator for Earth." Rigel's lip curled in what he assumed was the Hazari equivalent of a sneer. "Negotiator? I fail to see what your kind could possibly offer us." As they moved through the alien city, Jeffrey marveled at the sleek architecture and advanced technology surrounding them. Hovercrafts zipped between towering crystalline structures, while Hazari citizens went about their business, barely sparing a glance for the human in their midst. Over the next few days, Jeffrey's attempts at diplomacy met with failure after failure. The Hazari diplomats dismissed his proposals outright, their contempt for humanity evident in every interaction. Earth's delegation grew increasingly desperate, the weight of millions of lives bearing down on their shoulders. It was during a formal dinner that Jeffrey made a startling discovery. Overhearing a conversation between two Hazari officials, he learned that their species reproduced through a purely clinical process of genetic material exchange. Physical intimacy was entirely foreign to them. As he watched Rigel from across the room, an idea began to form. Her curiosity about human customs had not gone unnoticed, despite her outward contempt. Perhaps the key to changing the Hazari's perception of humanity lay not in logical arguments, but in demonstrating the passionate nature of human connection. Jeffrey's plan was risky, potentially jeopardizing the entire mission if it backfired. But with Earth's fate hanging in the balance, he saw no other choice. He would attempt to seduce Rigel, introducing her to physical pleasure and proving that humans possess qualities the Hazari had never imagined. He began subtly, using techniques of flirtation that were commonplace on Earth but entirely novel to the Hazari. A lingering glance here, an accidental brush of hands there. Rigel initially recoiled from these advances, but Jeffrey noticed a growing fascination in her eyes. As Jeffrey's unorthodox approach continued, tensions rose within the human delegation. Some members worried that his actions could doom their chances of securing the life-saving medical technology. Meanwhile, Rigel's father, the planetary governor, grew suspicious of the increased time she spent with the human visitor. Jeffrey now faced a critical decision. Should he press forward with his plan to win Rigel over, risking everything on this unconventional strategy? Or should he retreat to more traditional diplomatic methods, even though they had thus far proved fruitless? With the fate of Earth's pandemic response hanging in the balance, Jeffrey steeled himself for his next move. He was about to find out if one human's capacity for pleasure could change the course of interstellar relations and save his species from extinction. Jeffrey took a deep breath, steadying himself as he watched Rigel from across the crowded reception hall. The decision had been made. He would pursue his unorthodox plan, risking everything on the chance that human intimacy could sway the Hazari and secure the medical technology Earth so desperately needed. He approached Rigel, his steps measured and deliberate. "Might I have a word in private? I have some unique trade proposals to discuss." Rigel's large black eyes narrowed suspiciously, but she nodded. "Very well, human. Follow me." They made their way to a small crystalline chamber off the main hall. As the door sealed behind them, Jeffrey felt a momentary pang of doubt, but the weight of Earth's fate steeled his perseverance. "Rigel," he began, his voice low and earnest, "I want to explain something about humans that I believe you and your people have overlooked." Her posture stiffened. "And what might that be?" Jeffrey stepped closer, noting how Rigel's iridescent skin seemed to shimmer more intensely in the chamber's soft light. Our capacity for emotion, for physical connection, it's not a weakness as you believe. It's the source of our greatest strengths. Rigel's head tilted, a gesture Jeffrey had come to recognize as curiosity. Explain. Perhaps it's better if I show you, Jeffrey said. Would you be willing to participate in a cultural exchange experiment? After a moment's hesitation, Rigel agreed. Jeffrey slowly extended his hand, palm up. This is how humans often begin to form connections. We call it holding hands. Rigel stared at his outstretched hand, then cautiously placed her own atop it. Jeffrey gently closed his fingers around hers, noting the cool, smooth texture of her skin. What is this sensation? Rigel asked, her voice unusually subdued. That's the beginning of physical intimacy, Jeffrey explained. It creates a bond, a warmth between individuals. He guided her hand to his chest, placing her palm over his heart. Can you feel that? The rhythm of my heartbeat? This is what happens when humans experience strong emotions. Rigel's eyes widened as she felt the steady thrum beneath her hand. Fascinating. Our bodies do not react this way. Encouraged by her response, Jeffrey slowly leaned in, giving Rigel ample time to pull away if she chose. Their lips met in a soft, chaste kiss. Rigel froze for a moment, then relaxed into the contact, her free hand coming up to touch her own lips as Jeffrey pulled back. That, he said softly, is called a kiss. It's one of the ways humans express affection and desire. Rigel's usual composure had cracked, replaced by a mix of confusion and intrigue. I have never experienced anything like this. Why do humans engage in such behavior? Jeffrey smiled. Because it feels good. Because it brings us closer together. It's a fundamental part of how we form bonds and make decisions. As their experiment continued, Jeffrey gradually introduced more intimate forms of human affection. He traced the delicate patterns on Rigel's skin, explaining how touch could convey comfort and care. He demonstrated the art of caressing, showing how a simple stroke along the arm or back could elicit pleasurable sensations. Rigel's initial discomfort gave way to curiosity and then to unmistakable enjoyment. She began to mirror Jeffrey's actions, her touches becoming more confident as she explored this new form of interaction. This is unprecedented, Rigel murmured, her fingers tracing the contours of Jeffrey's face. I had no idea your species was capable of such intensity. Jeffrey gently cupped her face in his hands. This is just the beginning, Rigel. There's so much more to human intimacy, to the way we connect and feel. As they continued their exploration, neither noticed the small, pulsing light in the corner of the room, a sign that their private meeting was anything but. In another part of the complex, Dr. Marcus Steele paced anxiously. When Jeffrey finally returned to the human quarters, Steele confronted him immediately. King, what the hell do you think you're doing? Steele hissed, his face flushed with anger and fear. If this little stunt of yours fails, we can kiss that medical technology goodbye. Millions will die. Jeffrey held up his hands placatingly. I know it's risky, Marcus, but trust me, I'm making progress. Rigel is starting to see us differently. Steele's scowl deepened. And what happens when her father finds out? Did you consider that? Before Jeffrey could respond, an alert chimed on their communication devices. The Hazari High Council had called an emergency session, and the human delegation was summoned to attend. As they made their way to the council chambers, Jeffrey caught sight of Rigel. She was engaged in an intense discussion with a group of younger Hazari, her gestures animated as she spoke. When she noticed Jeffrey, a flicker of something, uncertainty, excitement, passed across her features. The council chamber buzzed with tension as Jeffrey and the human delegation took their seats. At the center of the room, Zax Thor, Rigel's father and planetary governor, rose to address the assembly. His gaze locked onto Jeffrey, cold and unyielding. We have called this session, Zax Thor announced, his voice echoing through the chamber, to address the human problem and its potential impact on our society. Jeffrey's heart raced as he realized the full magnitude of what he had set in motion. The fate of two worlds now hung in the balance, all because of a risky gambit born of desperation and hope. As Zaxthor began to speak, Jeffrey caught Rigel's eye across the chamber. In that moment, he knew that whatever came next would change both their species forever. As Zaxthor's voice reverberated through the council chamber, Jeffrey felt the weight of two worlds pressing down upon him. The Hazari leader's piercing gaze bore into him, filled with barely suppressed fury. "Humans," Zaxthor declared, his tone icy, "have brought chaos to our orderly society. Their primitive behaviors threaten to undo millennia of progress." Jeffrey's mind raced, searching for a diplomatic response. But before he could speak, Rigel stood up, her iridescent skin pulsing with an intensity he had never seen before. "Father," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor Jeffrey detected in her hands, "I believe we have misjudged the humans. Their ways may be different, but they possess strengths we have overlooked." A murmur rippled through the assembled Hazari. Zaxthor's eyes narrowed as he regarded his daughter. "Explain yourself, Rigel." Jeffrey held his breath as Rigel began to describe her experiences, carefully omitting the more intimate details of their encounters. She spoke of human emotion, of the power of physical connection, and of the intensity with which humans approach life and relationships. As the council session dragged on, tensions escalated. The chamber buzzed with heated debates, Hazari officials arguing amongst themselves about the implications of human influence on their society. In the days that followed, Jeffrey found himself at the center of a cultural storm. Young Hazari, intrigued by Rigel's impassioned speech, sought him out, peppering him with questions about human customs and relationships. One evening, as Jeffrey returned to his quarters, he found Rigel waiting for him. Her eyes, usually so composed, now brimmed with an unfamiliar intensity. "Jeffrey," she said, her voice low and urgent, "I need to understand more. Show me. Show me everything." Heart-pounding, Jeffrey led her inside. As the door closed behind them, he took her hands in his, marveling at the coolness of her skin. "Are you sure about this, Rigel?" In response, she pressed her body against his, her lips finding his with newfound urgency. Jeffrey's reservations melted away as he gave in to the passion of the moment. Their encounter was a revelation for Rigel. Each caress, each kiss, each intimate touch elicited gasps of surprise and pleasure. As they lay entwined afterward, Rigel's skin shimmered with an otherworldly glow. I had no idea," she whispered, tracing patterns on Jeffrey's chest. "Is this how all humans experience intimacy?" Jeffrey smiled, running his fingers through her silky hair. "It's different for everyone, but yes, this is the essence of human passion." Unbeknownst to them, their private moment had far-reaching consequences. Word of Rigel's experiment with human mating practices spread like wildfire through the Hazari capital. Young Hazari, driven by curiosity, began secretly exploring physical intimacy among themselves. The conservative Hazari elders watched in horror as their carefully ordered society began to unravel. Zaxthor, furious at what he perceived as a threat to their way of life, summoned Jeffrey to a private meeting. In a sleek, crystal-walled chamber, Zaxthor's rage was palpable. "You have corrupted my daughter and destabilized our entire society," he snarled, looming over Jeffrey. "This ends now. You will cease all contact with Rigel, or I will expel your entire delegation. Your species will face extinction without our aid." Jeffrey's heart sank, but he forced himself to nod. "I understand, Governor. I will comply with your wishes." As he left the meeting, Jeffrey's communicator buzzed. It was Dr. Steele, his face grave on the small screen. "King, we've got a problem. Earth just contacted us. The pandemic has gotten worse. We've got 48 hours to secure that medical technology, or they're pulling the plug on the mission." Jeffrey's mind reeled as he processed the cascade of crises. He made his way back to the human quarters, where he found the delegation in a state of barely controlled panic. "We need to take action," Dr. Steele insisted, pacing the room. "Traditional diplomacy isn't working. We need something drastic." As the humans debated their options, Jeffrey's thoughts turned to Rigel. He hadn't seen her since their intimate encounter, and now Zaxthor's ultimatum hung over him like a shadow. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the complex. A Hazari security officer burst into their quarters. "The governor's daughter has been arrested," he announced. "She accessed classified medical databases without authorization." Jeffrey's blood ran cold. He knew immediately what Rigel had been trying to do: find a way to help Earth despite her father's opposition. As the human delegation grappled with this new development, Jeffrey found himself pulled aside by an imposing Hazari female. Her uniform marked her as a high-ranking military officer. "I am Admiral Cora," she said, her voice low and measured. "What you have brought to our world intrigues me. I believe there may be a way for us to help each other." Jeffrey studied her face, seeing a flicker of the same curiosity he had first noticed in Rigel. "I'm listening, Admiral." As Cora outlined her proposal, Jeffrey's mind raced with the possibilities. An alliance with a high-ranking Hazari official could change everything, but it would also mean deepening the very cultural exchange that had landed them in this predicament. Time was running out. Earth's fate hung in the balance. Rigel faced severe punishment for her actions, and the fate of two civilizations rested on Jeffrey's next move. He took a deep breath, weighing his options. A bold public demonstration of human intimacy could sway the Hazari elders and create a distraction for Rigel's rescue, but it also risked further inflaming tensions. A covert rescue mission for Rigel might salvage their personal relationship, but could jeopardize the entire diplomatic mission. And Admiral Cora's offer of an alliance presented tantalizing possibilities. But at what cost? As Jeffrey prepared to make his decision, he knew that whatever choice he made would have far-reaching consequences for both humanity and the Hazari. The next few hours would determine the course of interstellar relations and potentially the survival of the human race. Jeffrey's mind whirred with possibilities as he considered his options. The weight of two worlds pressed down upon him, but a glimmer of hope sparked in his chest. Admiral Cora's proposal offered a lifeline he couldn't ignore. With a deep breath, Jeffrey turned to the imposing Hazari female. "Admiral, I believe we can help each other. Let's discuss this further in private." Cora nodded, her eyes glinting with curiosity. She led Jeffrey to a secluded alcove, away from prying eyes and ears. As they settled into the quiet space, Jeffrey began to explain the intricacies of human relationships, his voice low and measured. "You see, Admiral, human intimacy goes beyond mere physical contact. It's a complex interplay of emotions, trust, and vulnerability," Jeffrey said, watching as Cora's expression shifted from skepticism to fascination. He detailed the role of physical affection in human decision-making, emphasizing how emotional connections influence their choices in diplomacy. As he spoke, Cora leaned in, her skin pulsing with interest. "This is most intriguing," Cora murmured. "I begin to see why your presence has caused such upheaval among our youth." She paused, considering. "I will assist you, Jeffrey of Earth, but I require something in return." Jeffrey's pulse quickened. "What do you propose, Admiral?" Cora's gaze intensified. "A first-hand experience of these human mating practices you speak of, for research purposes, of course." Jeffrey hesitated for a moment, weighing the ethical implications against the desperate need to save Earth and Rigel. Finally, he nodded. "Agreed, Admiral. But first, we must secure Rigel's release." As Jeffrey and Cora finalized their plan, Dr. Steele made his way to the Hazari High Council chambers. Unaware of Jeffrey's clandestine negotiations, Steele prepared to make one last appeal to the Council's logical nature. The Council members sat in tiered rows, their faces impassive as Steele approached the central podium. He activated a holographic display, filling the air with charts and graphs depicting the dire situation on Earth. "Esteemed Council members," Steele began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil, "I present to you the full scope of the pandemic ravaging our world. Millions have already perished, and without your advanced medical technology, billions more will follow." The Council listened in silence as Steele laid out his case, citing statistics and projections. Yet as he concluded his presentation, the lead Council member shook his head. "While we sympathize with your plight, Dr. Steele, we cannot ignore the disruption your species has caused to our society. The threat of cultural contamination outweighs your medical crisis. Steele's heart sank as he realized the futility of his appeal. As he left the chamber, he received an urgent message from Earth. They had less than 48 hours to secure the Hazari's help, or the mission would be terminated. Meanwhile, in a stark Hazari detention facility, Rigel sat alone in her cell. The events of the past few days played through her mind on an endless loop. Her skin, usually a vibrant swirl of colors, had dulled to a muted gray. As she reflected on her experiences with Jeffrey, Rigel felt a warmth spreading through her chest. The intensity of human emotions, the power of their physical connections, it had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. A plan began to form in her mind. If she could only speak to her fellow Hazari, explain what she had learned about humans, perhaps she could bridge the gap between their species. Rigel's skin began to pulse with renewed energy as she refined her ideas. Suddenly, the door to her cell slid open. Jeffrey stood in the entrance, flanked by Admiral Cora. "Quickly," Cora urged, her voice low. "We don't have much time." Rigel didn't hesitate. She rose and followed Jeffrey and Cora through a series of winding corridors, her heart racing with each step. They emerged into the cool night air, slipping into a waiting vehicle that whisked them away from the detention center. As they sped through the deserted streets of the Hazari capital, Jeffrey explained the situation in hushed tones. Rigel listened intently, her hand intertwined with Jeffrey's, drawing comfort from his warmth. They arrived at a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. Inside, Admiral Cora led them to a small, sparsely furnished room. "You'll be safe here for now," Cora said. "I'll return once I've ensured our tracks are covered." As the door closed behind Cora, Jeffrey and Rigel finally allowed themselves a moment of relief. They embraced, the tension of the past hours melting away in each other's arms. "I thought I'd lost you," Jeffrey murmured into Rigel's hair. Rigel pulled back, her eyes shining with perseverance. "Jeffrey, I have an idea. We need to address my people directly. If they could understand what I've learned about humans, about the power of your emotions and connections, it could change everything." Jeffrey nodded, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. "It's risky, but it might be our best chance. We'll need help to make it happen, though." As if on cue, Admiral Cora returned, her expression grave. "Zax Thor has ordered the arrest of all humans. Your delegation is in hiding, scattered throughout the city." Jeffrey's mind raced. They needed to act fast, but they also needed a plan that could reach the entire Hazari population. As he, Rigel, and Cora began to strategize, the future of both their species hung in the balance. Outside, the first rays of the Hazari sun began to peek over the horizon. A new day was dawning, one that would determine the fate of two worlds and potentially reshape the future of interstellar relations. The first light of dawn cast a soft glow over the city as Jeffrey, Rigel, and Admiral Cora huddled around a makeshift communications array. "We're almost ready," Cora said, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Once we go live, there's no turning back." Jeffrey nodded, his heart pounding. He glanced at Rigel, her skin shimmering with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. Rigel's eyes met his, filled with purpose. "We have to try. It's our only chance to save both our worlds." As the final preparations were made, Jeffrey's communicator buzzed. Dr. Steele's face appeared on the screen, his expression a mix of excitement and urgency. "King, I've made a breakthrough," Steele said, his voice low and rapid. "I've found a way to combine our medical knowledge with Hazari technology. It could be the key to stopping the pandemic on Earth." Jeffrey's eyes widened. "That's incredible news, Doctor. Can you get to our location?" Steele shook his head. "No time. I'm sending you the data now. Use it in your broadcast if you can." The transmission cut off as Admiral Cora approached. "It's time," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Jeffrey and Rigel took their positions in front of the camera. The red light blinked on, and suddenly they were live, their faces broadcast to screens across the Hazari homeworld. "People of Hazari," Jeffrey began, his voice clear and strong. "I am Jeffrey King, representative of Earth. I come to you today with an urgent message about the future of our two species. Rigel stepped forward, her skin pulsing with vibrant colors. My fellow Hazari, I am Rigel, daughter of Governor Zax Thor. What I have learned from our human visitors has opened my eyes to new possibilities for our society. As they spoke, viewership numbers on the broadcast monitor climbed rapidly. Millions of Hazari tuned in, curious about the unauthorized transmission. Jeffrey and Rigel took turns explaining the importance of emotional and physical connections in human culture. They described how these bonds influenced human decision-making, scientific advancement, and societal progress. The strength of human relationships fuels our creativity and drive, Jeffrey explained. It's at the core of our greatest achievements. Rigel's voice trembled slightly as she shared her personal experience. When I experienced human intimacy, it was like discovering a new sense, the depth of emotion, the profound connection. It changed me in ways I'm still understanding. As she spoke, messages of support began flooding public forums. Young Hazari, intrigued by Rigel's testimony, expressed their own curiosity and desire for change. Suddenly, the broadcast flickered. Admiral Korra's voice came through their earpieces. Zax Thor's forces have found us. We don't have much time. Jeffrey's mind raced. They needed to make a lasting impact before the signal was cut. He turned to Rigel, an idea forming. Rigel, he said softly, I think it's time for a demonstration. Understanding flashed in her eyes. Without hesitation, they moved closer together. People of Hazari, Jeffrey announced, what you're about to see is a fundamental expression of human affection and connection. With that, Jeffrey and Rigel shared a passionate kiss. Their lips met as the camera captured the moment, broadcasting it to millions of stunned Hazari viewers. The effect was immediate. Gasps of shock and wonder echoed through homes and public spaces across the planet. Then, abruptly, the signal cut out. In the streets of the Hazari capital, chaos erupted. Young Hazari, inspired by what they'd seen, began openly displaying affection. They held hands, embraced, and some even attempted to mimic the kiss they'd witnessed. Conservative elders watched in horror, calling for order and a return to traditional values. But their voices were drowned out by the growing crowd of young Hazari demanding change. Amidst the confusion, Admiral Korra sprang into action. She activated her communicator, issuing rapid-fire orders to her loyal supporters within the military. Execute Plan Omega, she commanded. Secure all key facilities and communication centers. Zax Thor and his inner circle are to be placed under house arrest immediately. Within hours, Korra's forces had control of the government. Zax Thor and his loyalists found themselves confined to their homes, their power stripped away in a swift and bloodless coup. As news of the change in leadership spread, Dr. Steele emerged from his hiding place. He made his way to the newly established interim government headquarters, where Admiral Korra was addressing her supporters. Admiral, Steele called out, pushing through the crowd, I have information that could change everything. Korra's eyes narrowed, but she gestured for him to approach. Steele activated a holographic display showing complex medical diagrams and data streams. By combining human and Hazari medical technologies, we can create a treatment that not only cures Earth's pandemic, but also enhances Hazari healthcare, Steele explained, his voice filled with scarcely controlled excitement. Korra studied the data, her expression shifting from skepticism to interest. This is impressive, Dr. Steele. If what you say is true, it could benefit both our peoples enormously. She turned to her advisors. Reopen negotiations with the human delegation immediately, and bring me Rigel. I want her to lead our negotiating team. As word spread of the new developments, Jeffrey and the human delegation gathered to prepare their proposal. They worked tirelessly, crafting a comprehensive trade agreement that would exchange medical technologies, cultural knowledge, and establish a long-term alliance between Earth and the Hazari homeworld. Meanwhile, reports flooded in from across the Hazari planet. Young couples were seen walking hand-in-hand through parks, sharing embraces in public spaces. The cultural shift was happening faster than anyone had anticipated, creating a mix of excitement and tension throughout Hazari society. Admiral Korra, aware of the delicate balance needed, called a meeting with her top advisors. "We need to manage this change carefully," she said, her voice firm. "I propose a cultural exchange program. It will allow for gradual integration of new ideas while preserving the best of our traditions." As the negotiations progressed, Earth's leaders received word of the positive developments. They began preparations to receive the Hazari medical technology, their hopes soaring at the prospect of ending the devastating pandemic. Jeffrey and Rigel found themselves at the center of it all, their personal relationship now a symbol of the growing alliance between their species. As they worked side by side on the negotiations, they couldn't help but marvel at the far-reaching consequences of their actions. "Did you ever imagine it would come to this?" Rigel asked softly, her skin shimmering with a mix of emotions. Jeffrey shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "Never, but I wouldn't change a thing." As they turned back to their work, the future stretched out before them. A future filled with challenges, opportunities, and the promise of two worlds united by understanding and shared knowledge. The next phase of their journey was just beginning, and its outcome would shape the destiny of both humans and Hazari for generations to come. The euphoria of the initial breakthrough between humans and Hazari soon gave way to a sobering reality. As the first shipments of Hazari medical technology arrived on Earth, Dr. Marcus Steele and his team worked tirelessly to integrate it with human medical practices. Their initial optimism faded as they encountered unexpected hurdles. In a sterile laboratory, Dr. Steele hovered over a holographic display, his brow furrowed in concentration. The screen flickered with streams of data, showing the results of their latest trials. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Patient 17 showed remarkable improvement, but patient 18 experienced severe cellular degradation. His colleague, Dr. Amelia Chen, leaned in to examine the results. "It's like the technology is incomplete somehow, as if we're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle." Steele nodded, his eyes never leaving the display. "We need to contact the Hazari. There must be something they've overlooked, some fundamental aspect of their biology that they take for granted." Meanwhile, on the Hazari homeworld, the atmosphere was electric with change. Young Hazari couples strolled hand in hand through the capital's central plaza, their skin pulsing with vibrant colors of excitement and affection. But not everyone welcomed this cultural shift. In a dimly lit room on the outskirts of the city, a group of conservative elders huddled around a communication device. Their leader, a wizened Hazari named Vex Kaur, spoke in hushed tones. "This human influence spreads like a disease," he hissed. "We must act now before it's too late." One of his followers activated a holographic projector, displaying news footage from Earth. The images showed human test subjects writhing in pain, their bodies rejecting the Hazari medical treatments. Vex Kaur's eyes narrowed. "See? Even their bodies know this union is unnatural. We will use this to sway the people back to our ways." In the heart of the capital, Admiral Cora sat at her desk, her usually composed features marred by worry. A string of reports lay before her, each detailing growing unrest among the conservative factions. She activated her communication device. "Rigel, I need you in my office immediately," she said, her voice tense. Moments later, Rigel entered, her skin shimmering with a mix of anticipation and concern. "What's wrong, Admiral?" Cora gestured to the reports. "The situation is becoming untenable. I'm implementing new regulations on public displays of affection. We need to slow things down, give people time to adjust." Rigel's colors shifted to a deep blue of disappointment. "But Admiral, we've made so much progress. We can't go back now." "We're not going back," Cora assured her. "But we need to find a balance. The conservatives are gaining support, using the complications with the medical technology as proof that humans and Hazari are incompatible." As they discussed strategies, Jeffrey was in the midst of a tense video conference with Earth's leaders. The holographic faces of government officials and medical experts flickered around him, their expressions grave. "The pandemic has mutated," the chief medical officer announced, her voice tight with stress. "Our current treatments are becoming ineffective. We need that Hazari technology to work, and we need it now." Jeffrey's mind raced. He knew they needed a breakthrough, and fast. What if we send a team to the Hazari homeworld? He suggested. Dr. Steele and a select group of experts could work directly with the Hazari scientists. It might be our best chance at solving these integration issues. The officials murmured among themselves before the president nodded. Make it happen, King. Earth is counting on you. As preparations for the human expedition began, tensions on the Hazari homeworld reached a boiling point. Rigel found herself at the center of a political storm, her relationship with Jeffrey scrutinized and criticized by conservative factions. Walking through the corridors of the government complex, Rigel overheard whispers and caught disapproving glances. Her skin rippled with discomfort as she made her way to Jeffrey's temporary office. She found him poring over data files, his forehead creased with concentration. "Jeffrey," she said softly, causing him to look up. "We need to talk." He rose, concern evident in his eyes. "What's wrong?" Rigel took a deep breath, her colors swirling with a mix of willpower and uncertainty. "I have an idea. It's risky, but it might be our best chance at saving the Alliance." She explained her proposal for a public bonding ceremony, combining human and Hazari traditions. As she spoke, Jeffrey's expression cycled through surprise, hesitation, and finally, a glimmer of hope. "It's a bold move," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Are you sure about this?" Rigel's skin pulsed with drive. "It's more than just about us now. This could be the symbol our people need to see that coexistence is possible." As they discussed the implications of such a public display, neither was aware of the storm brewing on the distant Hazari moon colony. In a hidden bunker, Zax Thor, though still under house arrest, had managed to establish communication with a group of isolationist extremists. "The time has come," Zax Thor's message crackled through a secure channel. "We must purge this human influence from our world, despite the toll." The isolationists, a hardened group of Hazari who had long shunned contact with other species, began mobilizing their resources. Weapons were distributed, plans were made, and a sense of dogged determination settled over the colony. Back on the Hazari homeworld, Admiral Cora received an urgent report from her intelligence network. Her eyes widened as she read the encrypted message, detailing the potential threat from the moon colony. She immediately heightened security measures across the planet, her mind racing with contingency plans. But as she considered informing Jeffrey and Rigel of the looming danger, she hesitated. The human scientific team was en route, and Earth's situation was growing more desperate by the day. "If I tell them now, it could jeopardize everything we've worked for," she murmured to herself, her skin pulsing with conflicting emotions. As the human ship carrying Dr. Steele and his team entered Hazari space, the stage was set for a confluence of science, politics, and cultural revolution that would shape the destiny of both species. The air on both worlds crackled with tension and possibility as humans and Hazari alike held their breath, waiting to see what the coming days would bring. The euphoria of the initial breakthrough between humans and Hazari gave way to a sobering reality as complications arose. Jeffrey stared out the window of his temporary office, his mind racing with potential solutions. A gentle chime announced Rigel's arrival, her skin shimmering with a mix of willpower and apprehension. "I have an idea," she said, her voice steady despite the swirling colors beneath her skin. "It's bold, but it might be exactly what we need right now." Jeffrey turned, his eyebrows raised in curiosity. "I'm all ears." Rigel took a deep breath. "A public bonding ceremony, combining human and Hazari traditions. It could be the symbol our people need to see that coexistence is not only possible, but beneficial." Jeffrey's eyes widened as he considered the implications. The proposal was indeed bold, perhaps even reckless given the current tensions. But as he mulled it over, he realized it might be their best chance at unifying their people. "You're right," he said finally, a small smile playing on his lips. "It's risky, but it might be exactly what we need. Let's do it." As news of their decision spread, it ignited a firestorm of debate among both humans and Hazari. Supporters hailed it as a groundbreaking step towards unity, while detractors decried it as a betrayal of cultural values. Meanwhile, Dr. Steele and his team of human scientists arrived on the Hazari homeworld. As they stepped off their shuttle, they were immediately struck by the visible changes in Hazari society. Young couples walked hand in hand through the spaceport, their skin pulsing with vibrant colors of affection. "It's remarkable," Dr. Chen whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "The cultural shift is happening faster than we anticipated." Dr. Steele nodded, his expression a mix of fascination and concern. "Let's hope our work progresses as quickly. Earth can't afford any delays." They were escorted to a state-of-the-art research facility where Hazari scientists awaited them. The two teams wasted no time, diving into their work with a sense of urgency that transcended species barriers. As preparations for the bonding ceremony unfolded, Admiral Cora found herself in a precarious position. Intelligence reports warned of a growing threat from the isolationist faction on the moon colony, led by the charismatic and dangerous Vex Corps. Cora paced her office, her skin rippling with stress. She activated her secure communication channel. "Double the security detail around the research facility and the ceremony site," she ordered, "and assign our best officers to protect Jeffrey, Rigel, and the human team. We can't take any chances." On Earth, the situation grew increasingly dire. The mutated pandemic swept through cities with terrifying speed, overwhelming healthcare systems and causing widespread panic. Governments implemented stricter lockdown measures, but civil unrest began to erupt in major urban centers. Back on the Hazari homeworld, Dr. Steele hunched over a holographic display, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Suddenly, he straightened, a look of disbelief on his face. "I think I've found it," he said, his voice hoarse with excitement. "The missing component. It's an enzyme produced by a rare Hazari plant species." The Hazari scientists crowded around, their skin pulsing with a mix of excitement and skepticism. Dr. Chen studied the data, her eyes widening. "This could be the key," she breathed, "but how do we get it?" One of the Hazari scientists, his skin a deep green of concern, spoke up. "The plant only grows in remote, dangerous regions of our world. Harvesting it won't be easy." As word of the discovery reached Jeffrey, he found himself faced with an impossible choice. The date of the bonding ceremony loomed, but so did the urgent need for this vital component. Rigel found him in their quarters, his face etched with worry. "You're thinking of postponing the ceremony, aren't you?" she asked softly. Jeffrey nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "I don't want to, but—" Rigel placed a hand on his arm, her skin shimmering with understanding. "We both know what needs to be done. Our people will understand." With heavy hearts, they announced the postponement of their ceremony, citing the urgent need to secure the vital component for Earth's pandemic response. The news was met with disappointment, but also respect for their selfless decision. Admiral Cora, relieved by the change in plans, immediately began redeploying her security forces. She assembled a team of elite Hazari scouts to guide Jeffrey, Dr. Steele, and a small group of scientists to the remote location where the rare plant grew. As the expedition prepared to depart, tension hung thick in the air. The team knew the dangers they faced, both from the harsh Hazari wilderness and the looming threat of the isolationists. Jeffrey stood at the foot of their transport ship, surveying his diverse team of humans and Hazari. The weight of two worlds rested on their shoulders, and he felt the enormity of the task ahead. "Ready?" Rigel asked, appearing at his side. Jeffrey nodded, his teeth clenched. "Let's go save our worlds." As the ship's engines roared to life, none of them were aware of the isolationist fleet setting course to intercept them, or the desperate race against time that awaited them in the treacherous wilds of the Hazari homeworld. As the expedition ship soared over the rugged Hazari terrain, Jeffrey couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his gut. The treacherous landscape below was unlike anything he had ever seen on Earth. Jagged peaks of iridescent rock formations jutted from the ground, while dense forests of bioluminescent vegetation cast an eerie glow across the valleys. "We're approaching the coordinates," announced the Hazari pilot, his skin pulsing with a mix of anticipation and caution. Jeffrey nodded, turning to address the team. "Remember, we're here for one thing only, the plant. Stay alert and—" His words were cut short by a sudden explosion that rocked the ship. Alarms blared as the craft lurched violently to one side. "We're under attack!" shouted the pilot, his skin now flashing a vibrant red of danger. Through the viewport, Jeffrey saw a fleet of sleek, predatory ships emerging from the cloud cover. Their design was unmistakably Hazari, but unlike anything in the official fleet. "Vex Core," he muttered, his mind racing. "Everyone, prepare for emergency landing." The ship plummeted toward a small clearing, the pilot fighting for control as weapons fire streaked past them. With a bone-jarring impact, they hit the ground, skidding to a halt at the edge of the bioluminescent forest. "Everybody out," Jeffrey ordered, helping Dr. Steele to his feet. "We need to find cover and regroup." As they scrambled from the wreckage, the air filled with the whine of approaching ships. Vex Corps' forces were closing in fast. "This way," shouted one of the Hazari scouts, gesturing toward a rocky outcropping. The team sprinted for cover, energy blasts sizzling the ground at their heels. Once behind the rocks, Jeffrey assessed their situation. They were outnumbered and outgunned, with no way to call for help. But they couldn't give up, not when they were so close to their goal. "Dr. Steele," he said, turning to the scientist, "you and your team need to find that plant. We'll hold them off as long as we can." Steele nodded grimly, gathering his fellow researchers. "We won't let you down." As the scientists slipped into the forest, Jeffrey organized the remaining team members into a defensive perimeter. The air crackled with tension as Vex Corps' forces landed and began to advance. The battle erupted in a cacophony of energy weapons and shouted orders. Jeffrey found himself falling back on his military training, coordinating the team's efforts with a mix of human and Hazari tactics that seemed to catch their attackers off guard. But despite their initial success, they were slowly being pushed back. Jeffrey knew they couldn't hold out forever. Just as hope began to fade, a familiar voice crackled over his comm device. "Need a hand, Jeffrey?" His heart leapt as he recognized Rigel's voice. Looking up, he saw a swarm of official Hazari ships descending from the sky, led by Admiral Cora herself. The tide of battle shifted instantly. Vex Corps' forces, caught between two fronts, began to falter and retreat. In the chaos, Jeffrey spotted Rigel making her way toward him, her skin pulsing with a mix of relief and worry. But as she approached, he saw movement behind her, an isolationist soldier taking aim. Without hesitation, Jeffrey lunged forward, tackling Rigel to the ground as energy blasts seared the air above them. He felt a searing pain in his side but ignored it, focusing on making sure Rigel was safe. As the dust settled and the last of Vex Corps' forces retreated, Rigel helped Jeffrey to his feet. Her eyes widened as she saw the wound in his side. "Jeffrey, you're hurt," she said, her voice thick with emotion. He managed a weak smile. "It's nothing. I couldn't let anything happen to you." Before Rigel could respond, they heard excited shouts from the forest's edge. Dr. Steele emerged, triumphantly holding aloft a small, glowing plant. "We found it," he exclaimed, his face beaming despite the exhaustion evident in his features. Relief washed over the group as they realized their mission had been successful. But there was no time to celebrate. They needed to get back to the research facility immediately. As they boarded Admiral Cora's ship, Jeffrey felt the adrenaline of battle fading, replaced by a mix of hope and commitment. They had overcome this obstacle, but the real challenge lay ahead, synthesizing the enzyme and adapting the Hazari technology to combat the mutated pandemic on Earth. The ship lifted off, leaving behind the scarred battlefield and carrying with it the hopes of two worlds. As they soared through the alien sky, Jeffrey caught Rigel's eye and saw in her gaze a reflection of his own feelings, a complex blend of relief, anticipation, and a deepening bond that transcended their species' differences. Their journey was not nearly finished, but for the first time since the crisis began, the future looked bright. With renewed energy, they set course for the research facility, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.